Okay, we begin today's Daf Gittin, Daf Ayin Vav 75. We begin by thanking our sponsors. We begin by thanking the Talmud Torah sponsors for the entire month of Av. Benjamin and Elys Wohl. From all of us who do not have the privilege to attend personally in the Bais Midrash, we are truly blessed by the self-sacrifice of Moishe, Abramson, and Jeremy Lasson. And yes, definitely on mornings like this, when I had to get a detailed message from Moishe, step by step, how to get this program running, we are very much appreciative to both Moishe and Jeremy for everything that they do to help us to be able to spread Torah all over the world. We also thank Jack Bennett for sponsoring this shiurim in memory of Sergeant Nicholai Rappaport of the Givati Brigade, who died in the Hezbullah ambush in southern Lebanon on 2/7/98. His neshama should have an aliyah. We also thank Larry and Lara Franks in the zechus of refuah sheleima for Chaya Mira bat Sara and Sara bat Elisheva. Hashem in the zechus of our Talmud Torah this morning. The cholim should have a refuah sheleima meher v'karov. We also thank Yanky Aliza Statman for sponsoring today's Daf Yomi, the zechus of refuah sheleima for Chaya Rivka bas Nechama. And again, Chaya Rivka bas Nechama should have refuah sheleima meher v'karov. We also thank Greg and Rich Levitan. No. We do not. Okay. We thank everybody who came here this morning to learn Daf with us. And we also thank all those who woke up very early this morning, even if they went to bed very late last night. And of course, we express our deepest mazel tovs to the Rav and to the Rebbitzin upon the occasion of the marriage of their son, Mordechai, which took place last night. Mazel tovs to the Rav and to the Rebbitzin. We are going to begin today's Daf Ayin Vav in Gittin. We are going to start where we left off yesterday, 3 lines from the bottom on Daf Ayin Hey Amud Beis. Just a quick reminder, we are discussing a situation over here where a person gave a get, he gave a divorce document to his wife, and he threw in some conditions over there about things that she would have to do, acts of service, in order for the get to be valid. In this particular case, it's talking about where he said the get will be valid if, number 1, she serves his father, or she nurses the child. And we had a discussion yesterday how long that service has to go on for. So, just to remind us yesterday, Rav Ashi was of the opinion that any time a person expresses that his wife has to do any of these things stam, without giving a specific amount of time, it's just for one day. Whereas Rava said that wasn't the case. Rava said stam would mean it has to go for the extent of 2 years, and if he was mefarish, if he said 1 day or anything else, then it would be subject to his condition. So now the Gemara is going to ask a question. Basically, 3 lines from the bottom. In our Mishnah it said, a person presents his wife with a get, and he says to her, this is your get, on condition that you're going to serve my father for 2 years. So he was clear. He expressed 2 years. Or on condition that you will nurse my son for 2 years. Then, what happens? Unfortunately, either the child dies, and therefore she does not have the opportunity to be able to nurse the child anymore. Or, alternatively, what happens is, the father says, thank you so much, son, for conditioning your divorce upon your ex-wife serving me. The problem just is, I'd rather your wife not serve me. Again, it's not that she did anything wrong. She didn't do anything to upset him, but he just is not interested in having her serve him. So the halacha is, in such a case, ain't no get. Mishnah says it's not going to be a get. Why is it not a get? The answer is because he just didn't fulfill the condition. So Bishlam al Rava, according to Rava, we could understand the difference between the first half of the Mishnah and the second half of the Mishnah, where the first half of the Mishnah says it is a get, the second half says it's not, because we could say Reisha below parish. The beginning is talking about a case where he was not clear, and Seifa was the parish. where he was clear that it'll be a short amount of time. Rav Ashi, according to Rav Ashi, according to Rav Ashi, whether he expresses it or not, the halacha just has to be 1 day. So how come it's not going to be a get? So the Gemara says kasha, ultimately it's going to be a kasha. In other words, we don't necessarily have a good answer that we could present how to defend Rav Ashi's opinion. The Gemara continues 3 lines from the top on Ayin Vav and Beis. Tan Rabbanan. We were taught, Harei Gittin, a person says to his wife, here is your get, Almanash Tishamshi es Abba, on condition that you're going to serve my father, and he clearly expresses, Shtei Shana for 2 years. Almanash Taniki es Bini, on condition that you're going to nurse my son, Shtei Shana for 2 years. So again, he clearly expresses that the service should last for 2 years. The halacha is, Afal Bishlo Eskayim Atanai, even if the condition is not met, he does not go ahead. She does not go ahead and serve his father or nurse the child for 2 years. Harei a get. It's still going to be a good get. And the Gemara explains why lefi shelo amar la im tishamshi im lo tishamshi im taniki v'im lo taniki. Divi Rabbi Meir. Yesterday we spent a lot of time discussing the concept of a tanai kafel. A tanai kafel means that a person expresses both sides of the deal. If you will nurse the child for 2 years, it will be a good get. But just know, if you're not going to nurse my child for 2 years, it won't be a good get. Similarly, when it comes to serving his father, he would have to express, the get would be a good get if you serve my father. If you don't serve my father, that was not the proper language we learned yesterday, the Tanai has to come first. If you serve my father, then it will be a good get. If you don't serve my father, it won't be a good get. So our Gemara tells us that since he did not express both sides of this Tanai, it's not going to be a good get. And this follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We expressed yesterday that Rabbi Meir is the one who holds that every time you make a condition, it needs to be what's called a Tanai Kafel. In this case, since he did not express it with the language of a Tanai Kafel by expressing both sides, it's not going to work. It's not going to be a good Tanai, and therefore, regardless of what happens, the get is going to be valid. The Chachamim say, Niskayim Tanai, the condition indeed does take effect, and therefore, if the condition is met, the divorce will be finalized. If the divorce is not met, then it will not be finalized. Niskayim Tanai, now, Hareza get, Niskayim Tanai, if the condition is met, Hareza get will be a good get, and lo, if she does not meet the conditions that were met, then Eino get, it's not going to be a good get. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Ein lecha Tanai v'ksuvim she'eino kafel. There is no example of a Tanai, a condition, anywhere in Torah Shevach Sav that is not going to be doubled. That is the end of his statement. We do not know what he means by that statement. He just listened to this machlokas. He listened to Rabbi Meir saying one thing, and the Chachamim arguing and saying something else. And he just threw out this line and said, Rabbi Meir, you're saying every time a person makes a condition, it needs to be a Tanai Kafel, it needs to be a double Tanai, you have to express both sides. Chachamim, you're arguing about it. I'm just letting you know, anywhere throughout the Torah, when you have a Tanai, it's expressed with both sides. Now, Ikad Amri, now the Gemara explains. Ikad Amri, Rabbi Meir Kamar. Some say that he was actually backing up the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Some say he was actually bringing that as proof to the opinion of the Chachamim. The Gemara explains, those who explain the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was expressing his opinion. He's expressing his opinion to back up the opinion of Rabbi Meir. This is what he was saying. Ein lecha t'nai b'ksuvim she'eino kafel, v'havi lehu shnei ksuvim haban ke'echad, v'chol shnei ksuvim ke'echad ein l'lag. I'm sorry, I messed this up. When he says it to Rav Meir, he's actually asking a question on Rav Meir. So therefore, what he was responding to Rav Meir, you are telling me that every time a person makes a condition, what he needs to do is express both sides of the condition, which is, if you meet the condition, this will be the result. If you don't meet the condition, that will be the result. The problem is, that if you look anywhere in the Torah, you're going to see every time the Torah makes a condition, it expresses it on both sides. Now there's a rule that the Torah generally understands that you have to learn the entire Torah. So therefore, if a rule is expressed in one case of a Tanai, you have no reason to assume any Tanai is going to be different. So therefore, if it's said once, that gives us the ability to be able to extend the halacha to any other time that there's going to be a condition. If the Torah says it again and again and again, that means the Torah was saying specifically in these cases is where you have to have a Tanai kafel. However, if it's not expressly expressed inside the Torah, then you do not need to have a Tanai kafel. There are some who are saying he was responding to the Rabbanan, v'achi karmalu. This is what he was saying to the Rabbanan. Hold on, Rabbanan, how are you telling me that you don't have to have a Tanai kafel? Ein l'cha Tanai b'ksuvim she'en kafel. V'gamrinan minayhu. Look around. Anywhere the Torah expresses any type of condition, the Torah gives both sides of the condition. And if you're not going to be able, if you're telling me that you can have a condition without having both sides of the condition, you are inconsistent with every one of the Tanaim of the Torah. Just some examples. If you look at Rashi, he has a number of them. One of them that we had recently was Masechah Sota, where she is told, while she's giving the waters of the Sota, what happens if she did violate her marriage, what happens if she didn't violate her marriage. So we see that any time the Torah talks about a condition, the Torah expresses both sides. At this point in time, we'll have to figure out whether that means that every time we make a condition, you have to express both sides, or is it only in the specific circumstances that are listed by the Torah. The Gemara says, okay, now we have this machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. However, we have a problem, we have a contradiction. If a person says, here is your get, on condition that you'll serve my father shtei shanim for 2 years. Or almanasha tniki espeni, on condition that you're going to nurse my son shtei shanim for 2 years. Now what's the halacha? Mesa av, if the father dies. Oh, mesa ben, if the son dies. Eino get, the get is not going to be a valid get. Divi Rabbi Meir. That is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Now hold on a second. Rabbi Meir here tells me that the condition that was expressed here of nursing the child or serving the father actually does take effect. But hold on. He didn't express it on both sides. There's no Tanai kafel. Chachamim say, Afal pishlon eskayim Tanai, harei get. Even though the Tanai was not met, it's still going to be a good get. She could say, Tein li avicha, bring me your father and I'll serve him. Tein li bincha, v'anikenu, bring me your son and I will nurse him now. So kasha Rabbi Meir. This is a problem with from Rabbi Meir onto Rabbi Meir. Why? Because Rabbi Meir clearly is not requiring a Tanai kafel, and he's still saying the contingency lasts. And kasha Rabbanan ad Rabbanan, we also have a problem Rabbanan ad Rabbanan, because, like we said before, they don't require Tanai kafel, and here it seems like they are still requiring it. In other words, they're still allowing it to go through. The Gemara says, Rabbi Meir lakasha. The stira, the contradiction, in the opinion of Rabbi Meir is not going to bother us. Hasam b'delo kafel l'tanai. Hacha b'de kafel l'tanai. What the Gemara is saying is we're going to make an ukimta. Many times the Gemara is not very clear. It's vague in the language. And as we expressed yesterday, sometimes the tanai, the condition is just mentioned, and the Mishnah or the Brisa is going to expect us to do our homework to find out what the proper way would be to be able to get the Tanai to last. Rabbanan Lokasha, the Chachamim are not either a stira or a contradiction. Why? Because Chachamim don't always have to be the same people. It's possible that we could use the terminology Chachamim to actually be referring to two different people. Man Chachamim, who are the Chachamim in this case? Man Chachamim Dahacha, who are the Chachamim in this case? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, it is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who is that? The Omar Kol HaKevesh Ena Himena. Anytime there is a problem in meeting the condition, but it's not her fault, it's just a reality. Something happened, something came up that made her not be able to fulfill the condition. Harei get, the get will be valid. In this case, there was nothing that she could have done to prevent any one of those people from dying, and therefore the hold up over here is not on her account. It is just simply the reality that she couldn't fulfill the condition. Tana Rabbanan, 3 lines before it starts to get wide. Amar Allah, b'fnei shnei edim. If a person said to his wife in front of two edim, Hareza giteich amanas sheteshamshi es abba beishanim, he tells her, here is your get, on condition you serve my father for 2 years. He then tells her in front of two witnesses, Hareza giteich amanas shetitni li masayim zuz. So now it's a little confusing. He gives her the get in front of two edim and says, this is going to be a good get, on condition you serve my father for 2 years. And he repeats the process again, except that he changes the condition. He says, on condition that you're going to give me 200 zuz. So what's the halacha? The halacha is lo bitel diri ha'achron eser rishon. The second condition that he placed there does not contradict, does not nullify the first condition, and therefore it's an either or type of situation where ratz the misham shaso, ratz the nosnelo, nosenes lo masayim zuz. She can choose any one of the conditions that he offered, and if he meets any of those conditions, then the halacha is it's going to be a good get. Aval, however, this is not true in the following case. Amar lo b'fnei shnayim. If he says to her in front of two people, here's your get on condition that you give me 200 zuz. He then goes ahead and makes a condition in front of two people and says, he increases the price. He says, this get will be good on condition you give me 300 zuz. In such a case, they're mutually exclusive. And therefore, Bitel Divriya Achron Nasarishon, the second condition that was thrown out over there, is going to nullify the first condition, and therefore therefore the get would only be good if she comes up with the 300 zuz. If she pays the 200 zuz, it's not going to be sufficient. Now the Gemara continues, you can't use edim from the first condition to combine with edim of the second condition to testify about this. So this testimony is very important because these edim actually have the ability to be able to tell us whether or not this get is valid. Why? Because to the onlooker, to an observer, he sees that a person gave his wife a get. You can read the get. It looks like a good get. It smells like a good get, and everything about it. It gives the appearance that it's a very good get. The problem is that there are two edim who know that there's a contingency thrown into this get. Now, you would have to have those edim come by and testify about that. You can't have one aid from the first condition and another aid from the second condition testify that this get was given on condition. The Gemara says, ahai, which case is that referring to? Ilema Seifa, if it's referring to the case where the price was increased from 200 to 300, Hare Bato. Of course you can't use edim from the first condition. He was mevatel that. He nullified that condition. So what is their edus worth anyway? What's their testimony worth? That condition ultimately is gone. Ella Aresha, it must be it's going back on the first condition, where he made one of them as a condition that shall serve his father, the other one is a condition that shall pay up the money. In such a case, you can't combine the edim. The Gemara says, Pshita, of course not. They're not testifying about the same thing. The Gemara says, Ma'u I would have thought, Kol likiyuma tanai mitzdarfim, anytime edim are coming to ultimately uphold a condition. Whether it's a condition about serving his father or it's a condition about paying money, it makes no difference. Regardless, you could combine any two edim who are testifying that there was a condition given upon this divorce. Halacha is kamash malan, that no, the edim need to actually be testifying about the same thing. Both edim need to walk in and testify the condition that was made and what that condition is. You can't just use piecemeal one aid from this condition, another aid from that condition, and then combine them to say, well, the sum total of their aidus is that ultimately he threw a condition in there. It has to be that the aidus is going to be consistent through and through. The Mishnah continues. Just so we understand this Mishnah a little bit better, I'll give just a little bit of an introduction. There are three locations that we're going to be describing here in the Mishnah. Yehuda, Galil, and Akko. Yehuda and Galil are somewhat close to each other in Eretz Yisrael, and then Akko is all the way in the north of Eretz Yisrael. Now, there are some towns that are suburbs of Yehuda and Galil. As we learn this Mishnah, we're not necessarily going to know what those towns, where those towns are. So, for example, we're going to mention a town called Antifris. In the Mishnah, we're going to assume that the town of Antifris is in Galil. We're going to find out in the Gemara that indeed it's not in Galil, it's in Yehuda. Similarly, when we look at the town called Kfar Usnai, we're going to think that town is in Yehuda. Then we're going to find out that indeed it is in Galil. Now, it's important to recognize that these towns were fairly close to each other. So Yehuda and Galil were fairly close to each other, and they were frequently traveled areas. Now, we're going to describe what happens if a person lives in Yehuda and makes a condition, a Tanai, about his stay in Galil, and he goes to that other town, Antifris, or the other way around. He lives in Galil and he's traveling to Yehuda for business, and he spends some time in Kfar Usnai, then comes home. Similarly, Akko, we're going to be analyzing whether or not Akko is part of Eretz Yisrael or Akko is not part of Eretz Yisrael. Now let's learn the Mishnah. A person tells his wife, here is your get. Im lo basi, if I don't return, mikan ad shloshim yom, from today for the next 30 days. He was going from Yehuda to Galil. So this guy lived in Yehuda. He tells his wife, listen, Revitzin, I'm going on a dangerous business trip to Galil. Who knows what could happen when I go to Galil? If I don't return in 30 days, here's your get. You'll be divorced, and you don't have to bother spending time looking for me to find out if I'm still alive to get married. You'll just know after 30 days you're divorced. Now, he got to this town called Antifris, v'chazar. He came back home. Halach is, batal tonight, his condition is ultimately going to be broken. So now, I don't know why he came back home. Let's just think, he started traveling, he got to the first town, what we assume to be in Galil, and maybe he says, oh, you know what, let me just go home and get some more food. There's not so much food here. Or maybe he forgot something at home, so he goes back home. So almost immediately. Now, the halacha is, he actually now invalidated the condition, because he came back home. So he gave her a get, a divorce, on condition that he goes to Galil and doesn't come back for 30 days. He went to Galil and came back the next day. So now this get is invalid. He cannot use this get anymore. And if he wants to go back now, he would have to redo the entire thing all over again. Because he went to Galil and came back home, that means that this get is invalid. Similarly, person tells his wife, here's your get. If I do not come back in 30 days, one second. It was the opposite. This guy lived in Galil and he was coming to Yehuda. He comes to the town of Usnai, and he comes back home. The Allah has bitel tonight. He has invalidated his condition, and therefore the get is broken. It can't be used. And if he wants to go back now on his trip, he'd have to start the process all over again. Similarly, here's your get. Imlo basi, if I don't come, mikan ad shloshim yom, from today until 30 days. V'haya holech medina sayam. This guy wasn't just stop going from Yehuda to Galil or from Galil to Yehuda. This guy was going from Eretz Yisrael all the way to Chutz La'aretz. V'gia le'Akko, he got all the way up to Akko, and v'chazar, he came back home. Bitel tonight. Ultimately, he went to Akko. At this point in the Mishnah, we're understanding that Akko is not in Eretz Yisrael. Akko is part of Medina Sayam. So therefore, once he went to Medina Sayam, which we're calling Akko, and came back home, the halacha is, his get is not valid anymore because he did not meet the condition. He wasn't gone for 30 days. Next condition. Harei Zagite. Here is your get. Kozman she'evor mikneged panecha shloshim yom. As long as I pass away from your face for 30 days. In other words, he says, as long as it seems like what he's saying is, as long as we don't see each other for 30 days. Now, the guy kept coming back and forth. He left, but he kept coming back. Halacha is, since he did not seclude himself with her, hareza get in that case, the get does work. The Gemara is going to ask, I don't understand, he didn't use condition over here. The Gemara is going to explain that he obviously, the language he was using was more a euphemism for intimacy. But in that case, since he was not miyachid with her, he did not seclude himself with her, therefore he couldn't have been intimate. The Gemara goes on, Lememra, hold on a second. The whole way we explain this Mishnah is that the guy's going from Yehuda to Galil, and he gets to Antifris, then he comes back home, then it's as if he went to Galil and came back. Hold on, Lememra, the Antifris beGalil Ave Kame. You're telling me that Antifris isn't Galil? Not true. For a minute, we have a stira. Antifris be Yehuda. Antifris is in Yehuda. V'kvar Usnai be Galil. And Kvar Usnai is in Galil. So hold on. The whole mission makes no sense right now. The guy says that the guy's going from Yehuda to Galil, and then he gets to Antifris and comes back home. He didn't leave. He's still in Yehuda. In other words, it's like he's still home. Like he got out on the road, and he just went around the block and came back home. Why does that ruin the get? And that brisa continues and says, Beintayim, between the area of Antifris and Far Utnai, is Matilanos l'chumra. We're not sure. Geographically, we're not sure if that's Yehuda or if that's Galil. What's the halacha? In such a case, Matilanos l'chumra, we assume the worst in both cases. And we say that she is Mugureshes, top of Ayin Vav Mavez, Ve'ena Mugureshes. So we give her the status of being divorced. So now she can't marry a Kohen, but she's not divorced, and therefore, for example, she would not be able to do Yibum, she would have to do Chalitza. In other words, because we're not sure. We're just not sure if the condition was met. But the bottom line over here is that our mission doesn't seem to make sense anymore. Because we were saying that if a person lives in Yehuda, and he says, I'm going to Galil. If I don't come back in 30 days, then the divorce will be valid. He came back home because he went to Antifris. But he never left. He was in Yehuda the whole time. Similarly, Kvar Tnai is in Galil. So if the trip is the opposite, he never left. He was in Galil the whole time. Gemara says we have to understand, we misunderstood what he said over here. Amar Baya, Trei Tnai Ka'amar. He made two conditions. Number one, Imatina LaGalil. If I get to Galil, La'alter Havigita. In other words, getting to Galil, regardless of how long I stay there, once I get to Galil, I want you to know the get will be valid. Next condition, even if I don't get to Galil, v'imashtehina ba'orcha klasin yomin, if I'm going to be on my trip for 30 days, v'lo asina, I don't come home, lavigita, then it will be a get. So basically he says to her, I'm going to Galil. Once you get in Galil, nobody has any idea what happens. So therefore, once I get there, the get is going to be valid. Similarly, if I get lost and I never make it to Galil, and I just end up wandering on the road for 30 days, and I don't come back, within those 30 days, assume the worst, and the get will take effect and will be divorced. Now, in this case, Yigil Antifris, the guy started traveling, he didn't get to Galil. He got to the town of Antifris. V'chazar, and he came back home. So now, Duloli Galil Mata, he didn't meet condition one, because he never got to Galil, because Antifris is in Yehuda. Below Ishtahuye, Nami, Ishtai, Tlasin Yomin, he did not stay away for 30 days, so therefore, he didn't meet any of the conditions. So therefore, in that case, he's going to, the get will not be valid, they are not divorced. So, and the same thing will be true in the flip side, where he's in Galil and making the condition about going to Yehuda. Kvar Usnai indeed is in Galil, and he's basically making two conditions, that I'm going to get to Yehuda, or I'll be gone for 30 days. To get to Kvar Usnai, he has not gotten to Yehuda, and therefore he did not meet condition one. If he comes back before 30 days, he did not meet condition two, and therefore the get is null and void. Next case. This is your get if I don't come back for 30 days. Now, now in that case, he was going to Medina Sayyam. Halacha the Mishnah told us was, if he gets to Akko and comes back, then the get is invalid. Now hold on a second. You're telling me that Akko is considered Medina Sayyam? Akko is out of Eretz Yisrael? We have a problem with that. And the member of the Akko Medina Sayyam Kaima, V'amar of Safar told us, Ki avi miftri Rabbanan me'adadi, when the Rabbanan would ultimately take leave of each other, Ba'akko have a miftri. They would depart in Akko. Why? So when Chachamim from Bavel or from anywhere in Medina Sayyam would come to Eretz Yisrael, maybe for a rabbinic conference to speak to other Rabbanim, so the locals of Eretz Yisrael would escort them out of Eretz Yisrael as far as they can go. They couldn't just put them into an Uber and say, text me when you get home, and we'll be in touch, we'll follow up, because once they left, they were gone. There was really no way to communicate with them, so they spent as much time as they can walking them, being malav them, escorting them out of Eretz Yisrael back to their towns. Now, the local Rabbanim who lived in Eretz Yisrael never wanted to leave Eretz Yisrael. So they would go to the farthest point of Eretz Yisrael to escort them, but not leave Eretz Yisrael. Where was that point? Akko. So it's clear that Akko is part of Eretz Yisrael. So how could you say that if this guy gets to Akko and comes back home, he has fulfilled he has not fulfilled the condition, but he has met the condition of going to Medina Sayyam and coming back? Akko is part of Eretz Yisrael. Amar Abaya says similar to what I said before. Trei Tnai Ka'amar La. He's making you two conditions. Imatina Medina Sayyam. Condition one: once I get to Medina Sayyam, as soon as I get there, La'altar Gittin, the get takes effect immediately. Condition two is Imashtehina ba'orcha tlasen yomin v'lo asina lahavigita. Another condition which is completely unconnected to the first one is if I'm on a trip for 30 days and I don't come back home, the halacha is it's going to be a get. Now, if he goes to Akko, comes back home. So now, he did not meet condition one. Lo Medina Sayyam mata. He did not get to Eretz Yisrael. He did not get to Medina Sayyam. He was in Eretz Yisrael the whole time. He did not spend 30 days on his journey. In such a case, batal to know he has ultimately invalidated the get because he did not meet the conditions that were necessary. The Mishnah said, Harei Gitech calls man she'evar. Here's your get on condition that I'm going to leave for 30 days. The Gemara says, hold on. In our Mishnah, he kept coming back. V'lo over, he didn't go away. Amar Ravuna, my panecha, when he says, calls man she'evar panecha, that I'll pass away from your face for 30 days. My panecha, what does panecha mean in that case? It's tashmish. He meant to say, for not intimate for 30 days. Why did he call it her face? Gemara says, Lishna ma'aya nakat. He was using more of a refined terminology. He did not want to express what he meant clearly with his mouth, and therefore he used more of a refined language, which she understood to mean that if he's not going to be intimate with her for 30 days, then the get will take effect. Yochanan Amar La'olam Panecha Mamash. Yochanan says no. He actually really means that he's not going to see her face. But the problem is you misunderstood the Mishnah. It doesn't say that she's migureshes. Mikatani harezu migureshes. Does it say that she's divorced? Hareza get katani. It says the get is still valid, which means the lo have a get yashan. It's not considered a get yashan. Just a quick reminder, we had this previously in this Masechta, which is that if a person gives a get and then afterwards secludes himself with her, in such a case, the get is no longer going to be valid anymore. So the halacha over here is Luchi plus and Yomi Havigita. In this case, even though he was coming back and forth, the get is still going to be a good get. It can be used. It doesn't mean that she's divorced. It just means it can be used. Tani Kavasedi of Yochanan, we actually have a brayso that's clear. Like of Yochanan, where a person says, this is your get, as long as I go away from your face for 30 days, it kept coming by. Since he did not seclude himself with her, get, this still is a valid get. Get yashan. Ein choshishin. We are not worried that this is considered an old get, which is invalid. Sharei lo nisyachidima, since he did not seclude himself with her, and therefore the get is still a good get. He may then use the get afterwards. In other words, this is not an issue of a condition that he's placing on the divorce. We're just talking about whether or not the get is going to be valid. Are we concerned that he secluded himself with us? The Gemara says, hold on a second. Regardless, we have a problem here. If so much time spanned between the time that he gave her the get until the time that he's actually using it, maybe they actually decided to get along. So much time passed. Maybe they calmed down a little bit. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, Alchi Amar Abba, Mari Mishmei Derav. What's this talking about? Be'omer, it's when he says, Ne'emenes alai lomer shelo basi. He said at the beginning that he's giving her the ability to be able to decide, to testify. In other words, he puts the discretion in her hands. And he says, as long as she says that I did not come by, we'll believe her. Some actually learned this on our Mishnah, not only on that brisa, where a person says, the get will take effect from now if I don't come for 12 months. And he died within those 12 months. The get is actually a good get. Maybe they got long. They figured out how to get along with each other. 12 months is a long time. Amar bar Rav Huna, Hachi Amar Abba, Mari Mishmei Derav. This is what my father said in the name of Rav. But Omer, it's when he says, Ne'emenes alai lomer, I'm accepting her word to say, Shlo basni, that I did not come. So now, Madamasni lamasnisa, and the one who learned on the Mishnah called Sheken HaBraisa. It actually worked. You could certainly say that with the brisa. Madamasni brisa, the one who says it on the brisa, Avamasnisa, and when it comes to the Mishnah, Halo Asa. He didn't come, and it's a much longer period of time. The Mishnah continues. A person says to his wife, so again, similar to the previous Mishnah, except that this time there's much more time in between. So he says to her, this is your get on condition that I don't come for 12 months. Umeis besoch yud beis chodesh. And he dies within those 12 months. The halacha is Eino get. We've learned this previously in this Masechta as well, that there's something called a get lachar misa. A divorce cannot take place after a person dies. So in this case, because he did not say that the get should take effect now, what he said was, here's your get. If I don't come for 12 months, which indicates that in 12 months' time, the get will actually be effective. Now, if he dies before 12 months, the get can't be effective because he's dead. However, this is the key word. If he says the get should take place right now, it should be effective now, contingent upon imlo basi mikan v'ad beis chodesh. If I don't come from today for another 12 months, umeis b'soch yud beis chodesh, he died within those 12 months. Halach is a get. That will be a good get because it's not a get lachar misa. It's not a get that's taking place after he dies because it really took effect at the beginning of the 12 months. Another case, imlo basi mikan v'ad yud beis chodesh. If he says here's the get on condition that I don't come back for 12 months. Now what happened was the people who he gave instructions, he said, Kasvu utenu get list. If I don't come in 12 months, then write and give a get to my wife. Now what happened was, Kasvu get besoch yud beis chodesh. The people who he instructed to write the get got a little bit over eager. And they say, you know what? It's 11 months. The guy's not back yet. Let's write the get already. Let's get ahead of ourselves. Let's prepare this get already. Now, so Kasu get Pesach Yud Beis Chodesh. They wrote it during the 12 months. V'nasnu lach Yud Beis Chodesh. They waited for that marker of the 12 months to pass. Then halacha is Eino get. It's not a good get. However, if he said Kisvu utenu get leishti, write and give a get to my wife. Imlo bas mikan ad yud beis chodesh. So he first says, write and give a get to my wife, and then he throws in the condition that I don't come back in 12 months. Now what happened? It was kasvu besoch yud beis chodesh. They actually wrote it within the 12 months. V'nasnu lach yud beis chodesh. And they actually gave it to her after the 12 months. Again, halachas eino get. They wrote it too early. And Biosi says, Kazeh get. He disagrees and says, in such a case, it will be a good get. Now, if he says, Kisvu la'achar Yud Beis Chodesh, v'nosnu la'achar Yud Beis Chodesh, umeis, now he died, so he says, write it and give it after 12 months, and he died. Ima get kodem lamisa harei get. If they wrote the get before he died, it's a good get. The misa kadma leget. If he died before the get was written, ain't no get. It's not a good get. Then ain't yadua. If we don't know, we're not sure if they wrote the get before or after he died. Zui sha'amru the gereshus v'nim gereshus. This is a classic case where we'll say that she is maybe divorced, maybe not divorced. So therefore, she has the chumras of being divorced and the chumras of not being divorced. Tana, we learned Rabbi Seinu. Hitiru al linase. Our Rabbanim have actually permitted her to get married. What's this talking about? In the first case in the Mishnah, it said the guy says to his wife, "Harez legitef im lo bas mikan vad yud beis kodesh." This will be your get if I don't come within 12 months. And then what happened was he died within those 12 months. Our Mishnah says not a good get. Why? It's a get lachar misa. However, we had this Tosefta over here that teaches us that the Rabbanim, the sages, allowed her to get married. Gemara says, Man Rabbi Seinu. Who are these Rabbanim that allowed her to get married? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. Beidina desharu mishcha. It's the same Beis Din that allowed oil. What's this referring to? We know something called pasakum. We know something called bishalakum. There also used to be something called shemenakum. However, they realized that it was too much. It was Gzeir Shein Rovat Siri Chol Lamed Ba. So therefore, there was a Beis Din that reversed it. It was Rebbe's grandson. So that was that Beis Din that allowed her to get married. Savri like Reb Yossi, they held like Reb Yossi Damar Zmano Shel Shtar V'Chiach Alav. When there is a date written on any document, that indicates when the person had in mind that it should take effect. So even though he didn't expressly say that it should start working from now, the fact that he wrote a date on it, that indicates when he wanted it to take effect. Amr of Abba, Breder of Chia bar Abba, Amr of Yochanan. Rav Abba, the son of Chia, said, in the name of Yochanan, Yehuda Nasiya, Benosha Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi, this is the grandson of Rabbi, Hora v'lohoda lo kol siyah. So he paskin like this, that indeed the get works. However, none of his colleagues agreed with him. Ba'amrillah, others say the proper language was not called siyaso, rather called shaito. As long as he was alive, no one agreed with him. He tried to make this case over and over again, and no one bought it. Amar lei Rav Elazar lahu saber. Rav Elazar said to this elderly individual, Kishirusa, when they ultimately allowed this woman to get married, when did they allow her to get married? So remember, let's just give you a timeline. The guy does this process, he goes to his wife in January and says, it's January 1st, I'm going on a trip. If I don't come back for 12 months, if I don't come back by January next year, then the get should be a good get. We get word that he dies in June, 6 months later. So now, according to these opinions, she'd be allowed to get married. Why? Because we say the date on the get indicates that he wanted it to take effect from the January when he left. Now the Gemara wants to know, okay, you're permitting her to get married. When? Is she allowed to get married today? Or does she have to wait until the 12 months pass? So la'alter shri sua o la'achar shnei masar chodesh shri sua. Does she have to wait 12 months or could she get married now? The Gemara explains, la'alter shri sua. The reason why it should be permissible to get married right now is the lo asi. He didn't come. You have to wait 12 months for the conditions to be met. Gemara says, why are you only asking this question on this das yachid, on this opinion that allowed her to get married? Our Mishnah also gave a case when it worked. Our Mishnah says, if the person expresses that the get should work from now, if I don't come from now for another 12 months, and indeed, the guy dies within those 12 months, the halach is, harez a get. The get works. So ask a simple question. A follow-up on the Mishnah. La'alter havi, does it work now? She can get married now in June. The halo asi, because he's not coming. Odilma, or maybe lachri beis chodesh, does she have to wait until the January of the next year? The halo kaim tonight, because we have to make sure that the condition is going to be met, even though we know it will be met because the guy is dead. Gemara says, Ena chanami. Yes, we could have asked this question. We happen to have been talking about that specific case, and therefore that's why we asked it there. But indeed, we could have asked it in any case. Amar Abaya. Abaya says, everybody agrees. If he says, from when the sun comes out of its, sack or pouch, which means in the morning, when the sun comes up. The halacha is, L'chi nafka ka'amar. He means that the get should not take effect until morning. And therefore, if he dies at night, have a get would be a good get. Have a get after misa. Sorry, it's going to be a get after a misa. It's not going to work. Because he said, this get should take effect in the morning, and he died at night, so therefore, the get cannot take effect after he dies. On condition that the sun will come out tomorrow morning, he's saying it should take effect now, and therefore if he dies at night, it will indeed work. The Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Omar Manas Ka'om, we discussed this a few times in the past few days. He said Amanas on condition, it's as if he said right away. Lo nechaku, where is there going to be a machlokes? Ella be'im teitze, if you use the language of if the sun comes out. Mar savak Rabbi Yossi damar zman sh'shtar mechiyachala. Some say, like Rabbi Yossi, that the date on the star actually indicates when he wanted it to take effect. It's as if he said it should take effect now, im mati, if I'm going to die. Kimi akshav im mati. Another language, will take effect now if I'm going to die. Mar lo savar Rabbi Yossi, the other one does not hold like Rabbi Yossi, ki im mati graded. It's just simply as if he said, if I will die. We have 3 more minutes, let's see if we can finish the parak. Kasvu utenu get lishti. He says, kisvu, write and give this get to my wife. Imlo bas mikan v'adi v'eschodesh. It's going to come from today for another 12 months. Amar le Rav Yemer Rav Ashi. Yemer told Rav Ashi, Lema kasav Rav Yossi, kasav get al tanai kasha. And that if a person says, write this get, and he makes a condition, it's kosher even if they don't follow the guy's condition, because they didn't listen to him. He said to write it after 12 months, and they wrote it early. The Gemara says, lo, la'olam, really we could say, emalach pasal. It's going to be invalid. Since he should have said, if I don't come, then you should write it, utenu, and give it, the amar. What did he say? His language was, kisvu utenu imlo basi. First he said, write it, and give it, if I don't come. So haki kamar, this is what he meant to say. Kisvu mi'achshav, write it now, utenu imlo basi, give it, if I don't come. And therefore they were perfectly within the realm of what he asked them to do. Rabbanan, lo shnachi, doesn't make a difference. In any case, it's not going to work. Ton Rabbanan, lachar shavua shana. So if the person says, give it to her after Shavua refers to the Shemitah cycle, then he has to wait until after the 8th year. Lachar shana, he says, give it after a year. How long does he have to wait? Chodesh, a month. He has to wait for a full month after the year passes. Lachar chodesh, if he says, give it after a month, Shabbos, he has to wait a full week afterwards. Lachar Shabbos, if he says, give it to her after a week, what's the halacha? Yasser Zera Kamed Rav Asi. Rabbi Zera was sitting before Rav Asi. Ba'amr Rav Asi Kamed Rav Yochanan. Some say it was Rav Asi sitting in front of Rav Yochanan. The Ka'amar Chad B'Shaba B'Trei Utlas Basar Shabta. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday are considered the days following Shabbos. So, my dear friends, it's Monday morning. It's still somewhat Shabbos today. Okay? Arba v'chamisha on Wednesday. V'chamisha on Thursday. Umali Shabta on Friday. Kami Shabta. It's basically Erev Shabbos already once Wednesday comes about. So, therefore, he would have to wait those days. Tani Rabbi Omer la'achar regel. If a person says, give it after Yom Tif, how long is that? Shloshim Yom. Nafik Rav Chia. Rav Chia went out and Darsha Mishmei the Rebbe, he said that after Yom Tif, you have to if the person says give it after Yom Tif, you have to wait 30 days. He said this he said it in the name of Rebbe, the Kalsua. They praised him. They said, wow, what a beautiful drasha. Mishmei the Rabbim, he said, this is how everybody hoskins, you have to wait 30 days after Yom Tif, v'lo Kalsua. They didn't actually give him praise for that. Alma, lesach zakavasei. You see that the halacha does not follow that. That's why they didn't give him praise. In other words, you could say something beautiful in someone's name and say, wow, that's a really beautiful drasha. It's a beautiful idea. It's not la halacha, but it's still beautiful. But once you start quoting the rabbin, this is what everyone holds. This is the unanimous opinion. And it's not, people are not going to be so impressed with that. Hadron alach misha aksu. Mirza Hashem, which was to finish the Masechta together. Have a wonderful day. Kol tov.